Well, I am delighted. The start of 2023, we are kicking off the Tom O'Mahony show with the one, the only George Hook. Thank you so much for coming on the show, George.
Well, I don't know why you would want to talk to some ancient codger like me about anything, but thank you for making an old man happy.
It's my speciality. That's all I can tell you. It's, do you know what?
Yeah.
You say old codger, like I hate this phrase, but they use it so often in rugby nowadays, like with, or any sports. They use, this guy has so much IP. Like, we should be stripping your brain for all the stuff. You know what I mean? Like I have a picture of my granddad just there. He was 100. He passed away last year on his own terms. He kind of went, "No, that's me done now. I got the check, so I'm out of here." You know, but
Yeah.
he was a guy that we needed to download everything from. Do you know? So old codgers or not, I think I might specialize in just having people plus octogenarian ages, maybe.
Well, I tell you how that struck me in a way, and it struck me very sadly. A great pal of mine, all the way from school, was the great Tommy Kiernan,
Oh,
who
yes.
I think was the greatest rugby Irishman ever. When you look at his playing, managing, coaching, international board, IRFU, everything, right? And nobody did precisely what you're talking about. Nobody has got Tommy Kiernan on sound, and he would have so much to
Oh,
say,
man.
you know.
That's exactly it. I got my first ever episode with my grandparents was Tom Senior, and it was first ever, and still the most listened to out of all the people celebrities. It's still the most listened to because people go back and go because it was just prior to us getting married, and they were basically like going, "Yeah, just don't row." that was it.
All right.
When we talked briefly the other day, we were talking. You were saying that you had been in the Cork Opera House, Panto, as the mirror that
Yeah.
time. But where your first fell in love with the Panto was was the Cork Panto when your dad was in the pit playing music.
Yeah, that was the Father Matthew Hall, which is close to the Holy Trinity Church for
Yeah.
people who know Cork, and the panto, because the old man was in the pit. I'd go in free about 5 nights a week, so I knew the lines off by heart, you know, and my old man was playing the drums, and the drums were absolutely crucial to George Hook's life.
Really?
Because, oh yeah, well, we were very poor, you know. Now, my grandchildren have to go through a rite of passage.
Don't tell me you're feeding them tripe and trasheen. Please don't tell me.
No. I bring them to the house in which I was born and brought up in, and I explain no running water in the house, no toilet, outside toilet, in Albert Road in Cork.
Yeah.
Now, we were poor, as was everybody in Albert Road, and most people in those days, which is the late 1940s, early 50s, most people left school at 14.
Right, yes, of
So
course.
therefore, to do the leaving cert was quite rare from that area. But not only did George Hook do the leaving, he went to a fee-paying school.
Yeah, that's right. You're a Pres boy, aren't you?
I'm a Pres Cork boy, a very proud Pres Cork boy, and you'll be delighted to hear that George Hook IV is now on the under-13s in Pres Cork. But here's the point. The old man was a clerk in Cork railway station.
Job for life, yeah.
But he was the drummer on one of the great bands of the era, because remember this dance band
Yes,
era
yeah, right.
called Billy Brown and his music. So the old man would come home from the railway station at 5:15, grab a couple of hours sleep, and then play from 9 until 2 in usually the Arcadia Ballroom in Cork,
Yeah.
and then go to work the following morning. But that extra money got me to press.
Wow. Wow. When you can absolutely, like, there's a through line straight to the drums for you. That's
Yeah,
that's
but
class.
but even with the drums money, like you must remember, this is the era where the husband came home and handed his pay packet, because of paid in cash, unopened to the wife, right?
Yes.
The wife gave him back whatever for pints and cigarettes, and then she managed everything,
Yes, of
everything,
course.
right? But this woman, this extraordinary woman, also rented a cottage in Myrtleville near Crosshaven
Oh, lovely.
for the summer every year. So here is this boy with a hole in his trousers. He's with the rich and famous of Cork in Myrtleville for the summer, and he's going to press. Now, even with all that, she struggled to make the money for press, right? Now, I'm slightly paraphrasing here because it was only 7 years of age, but I know what the conversation went like.
Right.
She takes me by the hand and we walk up the Western Road, and then we go into press, and we're in the parlour, and Brother Alfonso, the principal, arrives. So the mother says, now this is some woman, I can tell you, and she says, Brother Alfonso, I want my son to have the best education in Cork. And Alfonso says, Mrs. Hook, you definitely came to the right place. But she said, I can't pay you. Okay.
Great start.
And Alfonso says, well, now, Mrs. Hook, that might be a problem. And she says, no, brother, I don't mean I can't pay you. I mean, I can't pay you a term up front. So she said, I tell you what I'll do. My husband gets paid fortnightly from the railway station. I'll come up every fortnight and pay off the fees. And Alfonso, to his everlasting credit, I'll do it, he says, right? So for the next 10 or 11 years, my mother went up to press every fortnight and paid off a portion of the school fees. And that's how George went to Press Cork.
So, you went primary as well. So you went to full.
Oh, it was a primary the whole way. I mean,
Wow.
I was so privileged, you can't even believe it, like, from where I was coming from, you know? And then the other thing that happens here, around about this time, I was born in 1941. So it's the 1948 general election.
Right.
So she says to me, she says, George, I'm going to teach you about democracy. Okay. So,
of course, that's 70.
So there's a primary school, national school there called the Model School.
Yes, yeah.
And that was the polling station. So we go up to the polling station, and she goes into the booth with me holding her hand, and she says, now, look here, this is how you vote. And she goes, Fine Gael 1, Fine Gael 2, Fine Gael 3, stop. And that's the way I voted ever since.
Because
Right?
that's what Mammy says. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So then we're walking down to Model School to Albert Road, back home. and we're walking past the City Hall. All right.
Yeah.
Now, the City Hall's a special place in Cork. Remember, two of our Lord Mayors. McCurtain was murdered by the Black and Tans, and McSweeney died on hunger strike. So this is a pretty special place. And remember, this is 1948. I mean, the IRA men are still alive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So then she says to me, and remember this, she said, Collins was shot at Ballinablow. And De Valera, not only did he plan the assassination, she said, but he pulled the bloody trigger.
Wow.
So you now have my political beliefs encapsulated for you.
Wow, you're going to have to see a show. A friend of mine, he did an incredible sellout show last year called The Murder of Michael Collins. It's one of the most incredible things you'll ever see. And it would be right up your your mother be sitting there wringing her hands together going, okay, all right, this is, wow. I mean, where, and you, the question was, where did you get, such strength? And I suppose in the way you projected yourself, because your average Irish person is, I suppose we're coming out of ourselves because we're still quite a young country and whatnot. But like from the get-go, everybody knows George Hook as being George Hook. There's nobody like, so now it becomes very clear. You had an extremely strong mother who went, now you'll stand on your own 2 feet and this is how you're going to be strong, like basically is what she taught you how to be.
Well, whether it was like talking to people like in a kind of a job interview or a discussion or whatever, I would always say, to understand me, you would have to have met my mother. so I am my mother's son.
I get you.
And see, I was an only child, right?
Ah, yes.
So she thought I was born in a stable in Bethlehem,
And you have a similar, my wife is very similar with my son. It's
so yeah. And she is just she was extraordinary. And the other thing was, like, if in the 1940s people were leaving school at 14, 20 or 30 years earlier, the whole bloody population of Ireland was leaving school at 14. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they left school. My parents left school at 14. And they were educated by the Cork City Library. And every week, the old man would walk me up to the Cork City Library and the Grand Parade, right? And I'd go into the children's department and he'd go into the adults. Now, the mother wouldn't go, but the old man knew what she read, all right? So the mother only read fiction, romantic fiction, right? But the old man had never read a book of fiction in his life, right? The old man read extraordinary. So for a fella who left school at 14, like, this father of mine knew all about politics. He knew about cricket. He knew, and we used to go to Mass in St. Augustine's Church in Washington Street. 11:15 Mass, right? So we go to 11:15 Mass, come out of Mass, and then we'd walk somewhere, right? And we would talk, right? We would just talk. Now, if you're wondering where Hook learned to talk.
Yeah, here we go.
So the old man would say, well, now, George, it's really interesting, the partition of India. Now he's talking to, like, he's talking to a
game. I need to up my game here.
Yeah. So he'd be saying, like, well, now, George, the partition of India. Now, when they established Pakistan, all the Muslims went up to Pakistan, and so we go on. Or then he'd say, I think today we'll have a bit of a quiz. And I'd say, okay, Dad, what's on today? Now, what's the capital of Hungary, right, or whatever. So we become capitals of countries. And I've this the greatest education imaginable from this man. Like, you can't believe it. Like, it was just the most extraordinary thing in the world.
But therein is the exact thing we opened with, was the IP. Your old man is downloading it onto you in
Yeah,
in the real time. You know,
yeah.
not a podcast. And this is something that I don't think enough. We're probably too busy, find ourselves too busy nowadays. So I've been quite conscious of it, because my grandfather was very lucky that he was literally 100 yards away, and everything he knew from electrical and mechanical engineering, he taught me. He was like, you're going to learn how to weld at 5. Simple as that. And then now I see, I'm all cautious with my dad because he lives nearby since we moved back to Tipperary. I walk up the other day and he's teaching my 3-year-old how to tighten a chainsaw blade. I'm going, Jesus, maybe not. But then he's like, I did the same. My father did the same with you, so this is happening. I was like, okay, all right, okay. But I did often wonder, are we doing enough? But you obviously can't give enough information to a child. Sure, you can't. But it sounds of how you worked out with yours.
Yeah, but like, the other thing was, my parents devoted themselves to me.
Yeah.
Now you then take me, who made a complete Horlicks of his marriage, of parenthood, of everything, all right? For 25 years, I'm running a bankrupt business, and I'm being chased by the creditors and the cops and God knows who else, right? And like, I wasn't devoting time to my marriage. I wasn't devoting time to my children. I like, in one sense, I say, yeah, rugby was wonderful, kept me sane, but it also meant I was never around the place, like, for anybody. And don't forget, like, I didn't get a job. I didn't get a real job until I was 54.
Okay, let's backtrack ever so slightly, so to get to the 54 points. So what arson about? I mean, I know you coached and stuff like that. I suppose, yeah. Are you classing that as not being a real job?
Well, I wasn't getting paid for it.
So
like, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Like, right. I mean, and I was running, like, when I talk to young people, you know, like, I talk to them about the CAO is a whole load of horse manure, right? Yeah. Because you cannot decide your life at 18 years of age. And then you're looking at the greatest living example of not getting his life at 18 in Hook, like, right? So Hook starts a business, right? Now, he starts a catering business, right? Now, to this very day, I can't boil an egg. So it wasn't an ideal choice of career, right? But I was a great salesman.
Right, yeah, I can buy that.
So like, I was the biggest caterer in Ireland. Like, I was doing Galway races, Punchestown, the Curragh, every major movie in Ireland. I did the catering on it. I fed 4 different James Bonds, right? Like, but I was losing money. I couldn't make money. Competent, right? So I kept it going by what might technically today be seen as slightly sharp practice, right? But when you're facing like disaster, you do everything to keep the company going. So I finished owing a ton of money. So I then went on the run. And in theory, I was director of rugby for the USA, but in practice, I was escaping the long arm of the law. Do you know what I mean? Because I owed...
hiding in plain sight at the World Cup.
You know, but like, I remember I remember a pal of mine was being investigated by the revenue. And the revenue decided that I was involved in it, right? So anyway, I went into the revenue at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in there for about 7 hours, right? And they're shining bright lights in my eyes as to what I've been doing, you see. So anyway, your man produces. In the old days in the banks, they give you back the checks. You might remember that,
Yes.
paid check. So he produces a paid check payable to me, signed by my friend who's under investigation for 723.59 or whatever, right? But it was certainly 700 and odd, right?
Right.
And he says, because he had me now, he had the check. He said, what about that check? And I said, I can tell you about that check. And he said, you're trying to tell me that all these checks that went through your accounts and everything, you can remember this single check. And I said, I can't. And I said, he said, how? And I said, did you ever have two fellas come to your door with baseball bats threatening to break your legs? And the revenue man said, no. Well, I said, I owed the fruit and veg man in Rush 723 something, and he sent two guys with baseball bats to get the money. And I rang my pal and I said, for God's sake, can you lend me 723.59 to pay off these guys? And I said, that's how I remember that check. And the revenue man said to me, Mr. Hook, he said, we're not interested in you anymore. There you are.
Amazing. I mean, but then if we, so you took, what position did you play when you played rugby in Prez?
Well, I was very talented. I had a great understanding of the game. For a forward, I was a goal kicker.
Great.
I had only one drawback. I was
that?
a coward.
Yeah, that can go against you.
And that was a guy, yeah. Now, looking back, right, and the New Zealanders believe that the worst players are the best coaches, right? And there's a logic to it, because if you're not a very good player, you have to work it out for yourself, right?
Yes.
But if you're Johnny Sexton or Brian O'Driscoll or whatever, you never had to work it out. You could do it. You know what I mean? So like when I was in the second row, I had to work out how to scrummage effectively or whatever the case may be. And then the second thing, in my own defense, I realized afterwards I wasn't really a coward. I lacked self-confidence.
Okay.
And therefore, when I became a coach then, it was all about trying to imbue confidence in players. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think I became good at that, because of my own history and background.
And so who came calling first when it came to coaching then? Was it London Irish? Was it Connacht?
Well, who came calling first is interesting. There aren't too many Jews in Dublin, right? But there was a Jewish rugby club called Carlisle.
Jewish rugby club?
Yeah. And
right.
They had a cricket team as well. And I used to play cricket against this fella. And I met him on Grafton Street one day, and he said to me, George, he said, they're after electing me captain in the rugby club. Would you help us, right? Now, I'm still playing, right? So Jews don't play rugby on a Saturday. So I said, well, that'll be great now. I'll play on Saturday and then I can watch you on Sunday. You see?
Right.
So, so then I said, I practice Tuesday and Thursday with Mary's. I'll come up to you on Mondays and Wednesdays. So I am now Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, involved in bloody rugby, not talking to my wife, my children, or looking after my business, right? But the Jewish lads didn't know that I knew nothing, right? So, like, I was learning on the job. It was
Right.
like I'm a second Joe. I've got to learn about back play. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I'm learning. Then I started coaching in Mary's. Then I coached the Leinster under-19s. I coached the Leinster 20s. And then Connacht came calling. And I coached Connacht. Now, there was no motorway, I can tell you, from Dublin to Galway.
Oh, Lord.
Like, oh, yeah. And we'd assemble on Friday, you see. Because, like, this is the amateur days. We'd
Yes.
assemble on Friday for a match on Saturday. And I'd be down fairly early and I'd be sitting in the Great Southern and the phones would be ringing from fellas saying, George, we're stuck in that loan. George, we're stuck in Loughrea, you know. But anyway, you get the practice going. And I did that. And then London Irish came to call. So, like, this is typical Georgie now. How do you coach a team in London? Like, so
Galway's hard enough to get to. Like, it's
yeah. So Georgie just abandons the wife and children, you know, and skips off to London and starts coaching London Irish. Now, to my credit, like, because I wouldn't want people to think that I'm modest or anything like that. I think I put more Connacht fellas on the Irish team than anybody before or since. Like, there was an Irish team went in the field. Fullback, Jim Staples, Connacht. Right wing, Simon Gagan, Connacht. Centre, David Curtis, Connacht. Then there was Tom Clancy at loosehead, Connacht. There was Mick Fitzgibbon at wing forward, Connacht. Noel Mannion at number 8, Connacht. Like, so we like, I did a good job at Connacht. Now, I was assisted by my former friend, Eddie O'Sullivan, who did an extraordinary job. Like, Eddie, I think, is the best coach I have ever met. He's just difficult.
yeah.
Now, there is a word which starts with B and ends with X, which I won't use, but it is just difficult. But, like, we worked together in Connacht, and then I went to America. You know, how do you coach in America? You know, like, so now I disappear again, right? And I'm national director for American rugby. I run the whole bloody country, men, women, and children, rugby-wise. And I brought Eddie with me.
So you had,
So,
like, the David
Eddie,
Nucifora role. Is that what you're saying? Like, you were over all of.
yeah.
Wow.
But I'm a much nicer person than David Nucifora.
That wouldn't be hard, in fairness.
Well, but in effect, yes, that it's a very good example of it, like, you know. But like, it was quite funny because I had coached the US team, national team, in the first ever World Cup in '87 in Australia. And the fellow who coached with me was a Kiwi called Ron Mays. And he rang me in about 91, I think. And he said, look, we're looking for a national director of rugby. Do you know anybody? I do, I said. Me. So he said, Jenny McJosh, that'd be great. Because we knew each other very well, obviously. But he said, we have no money. And I said, that's okay. I'll get the money. So then I then had to find a sponsor
Right.
to pay. Like, actually, to pay my salary at that time is a bit moot, because I had an apartment uh, in Providence, Rhode Island, right?
Lovely.
Now it was so small, right, that in order to get a table and chair and a bed into it, they put the bed on stilts and the table and chair underneath the bed. It was that small, right? And then I couldn't, there was no room for a telly. So we had a telly on a kind of a thing on the wall that we fixed on the wall. So it was above ground, as it were. And I had a shower and no cooking facilities. So, and I was away from home. Like, I kind of talk about it, but it was tough, you know.
I can see how it would be tough to turn down those, because they are opportunities. Whatever way you look at it, they are opportunities. I mean, who's
but
getting
I
them?
did have a wife and 3 children.
I get you. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you know, of the time though, you could see how your head would be turned and stars would be like, was the wife shouting at you at home, stop at home, you know, or was she saying,
Well,
well, if it's the thing to do, do it, you know?
well, there were a number of things I actually did quite well, right? In a lifetime of utter chaos and disaster, right? I married an amazing woman,
Right.
right? A German, right? Now, if you're going to get into trouble, there's nobody better behind you than a German,
I'm
right?
with you. Brilliant.
Nobody like. So this woman, who I love and adore, right, is as tough as old boots, right? And she was a distinguished academic. She became professor of pharmacy at Trinity College, Dublin.
Uh-huh.
But it was her salary, paid the mortgage, went to Dunn Stores on Wednesday night for the food while I'm skating around America having a great time, you know. And then, like, we're in March, we'll be 54 years married.
Wow.
Now, we shouldn't have been 54 days married. Like, she just, I mean, why the woman hung in there, I will never know. So I got to assume she loved me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I made her life a misery. I was like, if there was a kind of world championship for husbands, like, I would have been comfortably worst husband of the year for about 20 years running, you know. And then the other thing is, there's 3 children here.
Yeah.
And today, I've an astonishing relationship with my 3 kids. And I don't know how I did it. Like, I wasn't around, I was missing. But it's funny, I get a message like, there's a parent-teacher meeting on such and such a date, right?
Right.
Now, I'd be in Colorado or somewhere, right? And now I've got to get to the parent-teacher meeting, right? So now, Colorado to JFK, JFK Aer Lingus to Dublin, taxi, and I then come hurtling through the door of the school with about 2 minutes to spare for the parent-teacher meeting. So the kids, even though they were kids, like, I never missed a parent-teacher meeting. I never missed the opera or the concert, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the kids knew he's not just 2 left feet, like, but he's busting a boiler to be there for us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, some like kids are smarter than you think, I suppose, in a lot of ways, and that's
Yeah.
sometimes enough for them to. Well, look, he's doing, and that was, you know, I suppose your wife obviously saw that too. She's like, look, he's not a bad bloke. I could have married a bad bloke. He's just coach in
Ah,
America.
well, no. So then the American thing finished,
Right.
right? And I come home and I can't understand why she's not keen to see me, like there's a very cold atmosphere, right?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I said, like, what's wrong with you? Like, and she said, I want you out of here this weekend. Lock, stock, and barrel, right?
Okay.
And so then, so I said, what do you mean? So she said, I'm done with this. I can't take it anymore. Like, I want you to leave, and you can see the children in leap years or whatever the hell, right? So then I played a bit of a master stroke, I must say. I started crying. I think that was a master
Oh,
stroke, right? So anyway, she said, why are you crying? You don't give a SH1T about this marriage,
yeah.
And I said, I love you. I've always loved you. I'll do anything, right? So she said, okay, I want you to see a doctor, right? So I said, fine, check me into St. John of God's, do what you like. I'll do anything. So she said, no. Now, the kids and Ingrid had a different GP to me.
Okay.
So she said, I want you to see our GP on Monday night. I'll arrange it for 6:00. And if you're not there, forget it. So anyway, turn up at 6:00, you see, and the doc is there. I've never met him now. And then we were sitting there. So he says, well, George, we've a bit of a problem. So then, now I'm talking to him, but I'm really talking to her, if you know what I
Yes.
mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Doc, I adore her. I love her. I'll do anything to save this marriage, and I play a stormer, basically,
It
right?
sounds good.
So then he turns around and says, well, there you are, Ingrid. Like, he's totally committed to this. I don't believe a word of it, she said, right?
So it wasn't that good of a stormer, right?
No. So he said, we've a bit of a problem here, George, So he said, Ingrid, like, how can we kind of, do something? So she said, if he shows me he's committed to the marriage, I let him stay. Anything, says I, anything, all right? So the doc says, well, what do you want, Ingrid? And she said, well, she said, I don't believe he'll do it, but if he loads and unloads the dishwasher every day, it'll show he's committed. And I've been loading and unloading the dishwasher like a lunatic since 1995. True.
You got in there by your fingernails. You held on by your fingernails.
Yeah. So I was I had I'd written a couple of articles while I was in America for the Sunday Press, if you remember the Sunday
Yeah.
Press, and the sports editor, since dead, sadly, called Mike Carwood. He said to me, would you go down to South Africa, he said, to cover the World Cup for us? So would I? What, says I, So he says, well, he said, now the only thing is I can't pay you the way I do the regular journalists because you're not NUJ and all that kind of stuff. So he said, I tell you what you do. Go away, work out how much it's going to cost you. Travel, food, hotel, everything. Add a bit on for profit. And then we divide that by the number of articles you're writing. So you get paid per article. You get some money back. So anyway, I did that. And then I had no money, I got to remember.
Right,
so
yeah,
I
yeah.
went into my good pal, Eugene McGee, travel agent. And I said, Eugene, I'm going to South Africa. I said, but I can't pay you until I come back.
This
Will
is
you
like
give me
Mrs. Hook
credit?
again.
Yeah. So Eugene said, well, of course. So British Airways, London, Johannesburg. So then I had to think about it, right? And I said, I'd probably have gone to the World Cup anyway. And now I'm being paid to go. So go back to Eugene and I say, Eugene, I want to go first class. Well, actually, business class. So anyway, Eugene said, certainly. So the total bill, because he organized the hotels, he organized everything, the total bill was 5,500, right?
Right.
Well, I want to get the money back, right? So I get on the plane and I drink champagne all the way to Johannesburg. And I get off at Johannesburg Airport, and waiting for me is the great Sunday Times rugby correspondent, Carl Johnson, again sadly dead. Carl is there with a face like death, right? And I said, all right, Carl, the paper's gone bust, he said. The Irish press, when I was on the plane, the Irish press had gone bust. And I am now in South Africa for 3 weeks or 4 weeks with no job and no prospect of any money, right? So anyway, I had paid, everything was paid for, so I kept going, right? I had the best seats in the house, right? But I had nobody to write for. And then we lost to South Africa, and we lost New Zealand in the first match, beat Japan in the second match, and we now have to beat Wales in the third match in Ellis Park to qualify for the quarterfinal. And I get a phone call from RTE. George, would you do 5 minutes intro to the match with Fred Cogley by the swimming pool in the hotel? Certainly, says I, right? Now, I had no aspirations at all. Like, I was just doing it. But being the kind of guy I am, I went upstairs to the room and I do my 5 minutes in front of the mirror and I'm practicing and everything. So I then go downstairs. Fred is there by the pool. And he says, well, now, George, what do you think about chances against Wales? And Hook launches into 5 minutes of carefully prepared, superb analysis, right? Meantime, back at RTE, they're getting ready to do the match. And Bill O'Hurley was the chairman at that time, and the great Mick Doyle.
Yeah.
O'Hurley turns around to Mick Doyle and he says, geez, that was really good, he says. And Mickey Quinn was there. And Mickey Quinn says, sure, don't I know George? He coached the Americans in the World Cup, So anyway, I came home and I got paid 25 quid for it. That was very important. So I came home, and a couple of months later, Ireland are playing Romania. In Romania.
I believe it was Alan
Quinlan's.
I think it was his debut, I think. Would have been
Don't
around
know.
that. I think it was.
Don't know. And RT said to me, will you do it? 25 quid. Will I what? Says I, right? So he said, we're not taking the match too seriously because we have a ton of stuff on, right? And we're just doing the match. And you 4 minutes before the match, you've half time and you've nothing after the match because we're going somewhere else, right? But we're not taking it seriously. Well, I knew that. Michael Lester was doing the job. So I knew they weren't taking it seriously, right? Yeah. Leicester probably thought it was Kerry against Armagh. But anyway, I go in, and you won't believe it. Hurricane something or other hits Ireland. It hits the British Isles. Formula One goes down, Premiership soccer goes down, Davis Cup tennis goes down, the Open Championship golf goes down. I don't know what it was. And all they're left with is Ireland, Romania, and me, right? And John O'Brien, the producer, came into me and he said, George, can you talk for 4 hours? And I said, can I talk for 4 hours? So anyway, they then came back to me and said, like, will you do the odd job for us? And that's where the RTE thing started at 25 quid a throw.
I mean, and there was no, what was beautiful about it was that it seems to have happened so organically. Like you were literally, like you weren't, let's coach George on this. Let's give him all the usual sound bites. They just let you go, which is beautiful.
Well, that was yeah. And then I got a phone call and, well, Ingrid got a call. And Ingrid being a German isn't great on the Gaeilge. And she rings me up and I'm inside an RG and she says, there's a fella looking for you. This is his number. It's urgent. And I can't pronounce his name. So I said, fine. So I ring the number and the fella answers, I know no Sulawan, right? So he says, I'm the sports editor of the Indo. And he said, I saw you doing a bit of stuff. Would you do an article for us for tomorrow after the match? So I said, well, of course, happy to. And he said, I'll get somebody to ring you to ghost it for you. And I said, no, I'll write it myself. And he said, can you do that? And I said, I went to school, didn't I? Says I, right? So he said, okay, will you give me 500 words? So I wrote 500 words with a pencil on paper. And then you call it down the line on those days, right? There was wasn't internet stuff. And there'd be a lady at the other end, and you'd say, this afternoon, and she'd type it all up.
She'd dictate the whole, right, yeah.
So then he gave me 25 quid. So Ingrid couldn't believe her luck. I was getting 50 quid. Well, I wasn't getting 50 quid a week because there wasn't that much rugby. But there was the Indo every week. And then one thing led to another. But, you know, and suddenly the hole in Georgie's trousers was repaired. And I was okay.
But isn't it, like, I love the notion that the organicness of it, and you found your calling. You finally found your calling, even albeit, you know, it took you to your 50s or whatever to find it. But by God, when you did find it, like, there's still those iconic, it still pops up on my phone and Instagram. There'll be still an iconic moment where you did that speech in Thomond Park about Lourdes, Fatima. Like, it still pops up because obviously it knows I want to see this stuff. Like, but I wonder, did television entertainment rugby punditry peak when yourself and Popey did the Markman Wise breakfast sketch? Because that, for me, I remember watching that, and I had tickets to the match, and I'm not sure if it was that or just before, but I was in, I can't remember what pub it was, with a couple of lads, and I was going, Christ, lads, I don't know if I want to go to actually watch the match. The boys are having such good crack here. Like, if anybody hasn't seen it, go. It's on YouTube. It is on YouTube, where you do the full swinging the sausages. It's like, that is peak for me. How does anybody top that?
Well, see, I'm not saying that television punditry today is better or worse. It's different.
Yeah.
Right? And it's different for a number of reasons, right? Like, if you think McGurk, Hook, and Pope didn't have an international cap between them. Now, there's no punditry today that would go on the air without a fellow with an international cap, right?
Right enough.
The second thing is that RTE never got enough credit. The freedom they gave people, there was us, there was Giles and Dunphy,
yeah,
there was Spillane, Brawley, all these guys, they never got the credit for the freedom they gave us to speak. It's much more structured now, and therefore, it's just different. And like I remember the second match I did, it was a Six Nations game, and Bill O'Hurley again was in the chair. This is before the arrival of the Hook Pope Roadshow, like,
Yeah.
and it was on, and it was just me, and Bill turned around to me, and I started giving a very erudite explanation about Eric Miller's performance at number 8, and after match, we're walking out of the studio, and Bill turned around to me. And remember, we're Cork now, the two of us, right?
Yeah.
And he says to me, George, he said, let me tell you something. He said, 75% of the people who watch sport on television don't understand it. He said, talk to the 75%. Don't talk to the 25%. So therefore, we never sort of said, like, well, now, Ireland are using the 4-up defence, whereas South Africa are using 3-up defence, and John Hayes at loose head, his left leg is pointing towards Mecca, and this means that the scrum is wheeling. We did it differently. We talked in a way, and it was conscious, like it was really
of course.
conscious.
Yeah.
We were always thinking about, there's a ton of people out there who don't really understand all this, and they want it sort of plain speaking. And then you see the other fellow who got no credit at all was McGurk. Like, you got to remember that McGurk was actually anarchic. Right?
Right.
So we went in there and we had no idea what he was going to do. Right? So, like, Munster could be playing Biarritz, and he'd turn around and he'd say, like, how are Stade Francais doing? And the next time, like, there'd be chaos in the studio. There'd be literally chaos, like. But that chaos, now, what McGurk did deliberately, or as I suspect, he wasn't a great researcher. It wasn't his style to sort of have 24 pages of research stuff, And then, like, another great thing of his was halftime was very important because there'd be a few clips, right? So he'd turn around during the break and say, George, I'm going to come to you about the O'Driscoll try. Popey, I'm going to come to you about the Lawrence Delalio try. And Connor, I'm going to go to you about the drop goal. So now you're in the break and you're thinking the O'Driscoll try, Stringer, O'Gara, had it. Okay, back live now. And then McGurk could say, George, tell me about the drop goal. Right? And then I think, holy suffering God, like, what happened with drop goal? I can't remember. I wasn't paying attention, like, And we would be like, so it was constantly, in one sense, you were kind of under pressure because you didn't know what would happen next, but it made for television.
Of course it did. Chaos.
Yeah. But it's just, they don't do it that way anymore. And like, when you think that at no time in any of our time with RTE did somebody say to us, I want you to do this, or I want you to say that, or I want you to do it this way. Never, ever did somebody do that. So RTE put their total trust, as they did with Dunphy and Giles, as they did with Spillane. They put their total trust in their panel. Now, today, for a lot of reasons, like the cancel culture, all kinds of things, for a lot of reasons. Nobody today, no station today anywhere in the world would give a job to a 54-year-old who didn't have a cap to his name.
I'm
You know,
with you.
was the
Yeah.
day women. Nobody would do that today.
But I mean, my thought process on it too. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't think to. I mean, it isn't down on the book. Well, we need to find a guy in his 50s who's never had a cap. But characters, if they're constantly on about growing the game and this rubbish about putting names on the back of jerseys and stuff like that, the English are going doing to try and grow the game to the greater masses. To grow the game to the greater masses, you were at the cusp of it. Like the Heineken Cup was only emerging, you know, and stuff like that. But sure, people didn't, like my dad is a hurling man. He didn't know anything about rugby. But when he'd watch you, it was enough. It was like, well, that's all. This is sports entertainment. This is all I need to see now. You know, because he didn't know which, they can't pass it forward. That's about it. And that has kind of passed us by because all it is now is stats. And sure, that goes over the head of more than 25%. That goes over the head
Well,
of
it's a different way of doing it. That's the point. It's a different way of doing it, and it's not just rugby. It's sport on television is just done differently.
I don't know if you know this, but you were an influencer before there was influencers. Nowadays you'd be on TikTok or Instagram, and you'd tell people who you're wearing today or whatnot. I was getting a suit in 2000, maybe 2004 in Limerick, in Sexton's in Limerick one time. And I was looking, my dad happened to be with me. He says, you should get one of these ties. I said, well, I'm not ready for that tie. It's a lot of tie. And the gentleman who is Sexton, I think he's Johnny Sexton's second cousin or whatever. He says, I'll tell you, he says, we cannot keep those ties. This is on a Monday. I says, what? He says, the likes of those ties, he said, go out the door. If during the Six Nations, if George Hook is wearing a brazen or a bold tie or a crazy design, guys are in here. And he says, never before. He says, I'm having to ship him in from all over the world because of George Hook. If George Hook, and I was like, Hook needs to bring out his own ties. That's what he needs to do. Because you were influencing blokes at the time.
The tie thing was interesting because I'm colorblind, right? So
Hey.
I had no idea what I was wearing or buying, like, you know. And I'd be wearing these ties, and it's funny now because nobody wears a tie, right? And I have 120 ties upstairs hanging on a rack, like, that I'd never wear. But like, it was people used to like text each other and say, have you seen what Hook is wearing today?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Yeah.
because I didn't mean to. It wasn't kind of conscious. It's just I had no idea of like fashion per se. You know what I mean?
I won't keep you too much longer, so I will, but I do want to kind of get your thoughts on where we're at as a. I mean, we know where Leinster are at. I mean, they're like Michael Schumacher back in his pomp. It's nearly boring to watch him. You know, they're going to nearly win. You know, Connacht are doing Connacht at the minute, and they're kind of blowing hot and cold. Can you pinpoint what's happening with Ulster at the minute? Because they have down on paper they've got an unbelievable team, but the wheels have come off the wagon. Something serious, haven't they?
Well, I think the first thing is if you take the total package, total Irish package, is when you think that we are, of the major nations, the smallest in terms of our playing population, and I don't think we deserve it, but we are one in the world, right? We're number one in the world. That is incredible given the population. Why, you must ask yourself, did that happen? And it's all down to people like Sid Miller, Ronnie Dawson, Tommy Kiernan, because we were the only ones who got professionalism right. Like, the Scots made a complete Horlicks of it. I mean, can you imagine that Wales, can you imagine that Wales can hardly put a team in the field at provincial or national level.
Yeah.
That England, with the biggest population, a rugby playing population in the world, right, are more likely to be at the bottom of the Six Nations, easily accepted, than at the top. And it's all due to we made the right decision on professionalism. It was interesting. Tommy Kiernan, there was a great bunch of illegal bookmakers in Pittsburgh called the Rooneys, right?
Right.
And then they became legitimate bookmakers, and they owned the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Right.
And later on, Rooney himself became the American ambassador to Ireland. And Tommy went over and he said, listen, we're going professional. We don't know the first thing about it. What do you do? And Rooney said, own the players.
Wow.
And we owned the players.
Yeah.
And that was great. So we first of all, by owning the players, unlike England, who have to go cap in hand to Harlequins or whatever, or the French or the Welsh or whatever, we run it, right? Whatever you might think, we run it. I can't explain the Ulster thing. I actually can't explain it. But one thing you do know is, like, winning is a habit,
Yes.
right? And if you just take, like, last week, where Ulster are winning with like a minute on the clock or whatever, and they lose to La Rochelle, you know in your water that Leinster would not have lost in that situation. Munster, with 14 men, held out against Northampton. I think Ulster at the moment lack confidence and self-belief. And until you actually start putting it together, it won't. You could probably say as well there aren't enough Protestants on the Ulster team.
I have noticed that, actually. Yeah, there's a few Teague names popping up there, too many maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's gas really, again, for people of my generation. I mean, when we went north as a club, only Protestants played rugby. Catholics didn't play rugby because the Catholic schools were playing Gaelic football or whatever. And when you looked at there were RBAI boys and all the rest of it, And two things have happened, of course, is that, which I'm against, some fella comes over here from South Africa on his holidays, and the next minute he's on the Irish team. Now, in one sense, that enables us to compete. But on the other hand, unless that has to be handled in a particular way, like I don't think South African coaches were good for Munster.
No.
And now we suddenly see it's early days.
Yeah.
We're looking at change. And above all, which worries me more than any single thing, we have a game for which traumatic brain injury now is part of the game, and it cannot continue.
It was funny after those cards at the weekend in the Munster match, and with the red card with Jack O'Donoghue. I mean, yeah, he didn't drop his height. What I noticed was that suddenly everybody was immediately inspired to start chop tackling. It was working perfect. It's like, okay, now isn't that funny how that? Now I give the ref his due. At first, I was kind of saying, well, the other one should have been red as well if that's the case. But he put his foot down and went, no, it's by the letter of the law, it's a red. And suddenly everybody now is chop tackling. It was interesting that from the outset, as soon as the red came out, that's it. Nobody dared go above the waistline nearly. So I mean, yeah, it's the one thing I would be about. Of course, our lad has it written all over him that he wants to play rugby, but it's like,
Well, I mean, I have 3 grandsons playing rugby, and I'm not going to tell them don't play rugby.
Yeah, of course.
But the point is, why? Like, if if Johnny Sexton wants to play rugby and risk injury because he's getting 500,000 a year or whatever for doing it, that's fine. But a 13-year-old child doesn't make that decision. And we could change the game tomorrow. We wouldn't have to go to World Rugby. We wouldn't have to go anywhere. We could change the schoolboy game to make it safer.
Yeah, that's true. Just change it in the schoolboys and that's that. Yeah, that's a valid point. Yeah. Why not? It's, but I want to just quickly finish up. You have set up a school. You've gone back to teaching the boys. I saw that which is really cool. You're giving back to Pres Cork and you're teaching boys podcasting and broadcasting skills.
Well, we've just finished that now this year, because like there's a difficulty for me, obviously at 81 driving up and down, but I did it for the best part of 3 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And the other thing that we're doing is we're doing an oral history. So, and I was moved by it when I said, we don't have Kiernan, you know?
Yes.
And so now we're trying to get on tape, and we're going to have a whole series of podcasts of the 150 years of Pres, you know? So,
wow. Because like it was only just I found a book I hadn't seen in ages. Dad, he had it in his library of books, whatever. It was a book by Van Espik, the great rugby historian. I was like, and I started reading it again. It was like, it's an awful, it's not a pity, at least he was writing. But again, like Tommy Kiernan's wasn't down on audio and stuff, but the more technology for that reason would be better to get. But more than anything, we have over an hour with the great George Hook here on the Tom Mahony show, and I'm so delighted to have had you on. This is, well, yeah, it was a dream come true. You made rugby interesting for a lad who grew up in a hurling place where when I'd put down the hurling and started playing rugby, and I'd fellas pulling the father aside going, what's he doing playing that old Protestant thing? Do you know, at least Hooky with his ties and whatnot suddenly made rugby very interesting for fellas who hadn't a clue what they were looking at.
Yeah, but we're not. I only watch Gaelic football and hurling if there are fellas in red shirts playing the game, and for most people, Christy Ring is just a bridge in Cork. I saw him play.
You saw Christy Ring play?
Oh yeah, I saw him. I saw him in Thurles when we beat Limerick, and the great McMackey was the umpire at one of the ends, and Ringy got either 2 or 3 goals in the last 10 minutes to beat them. And then I went up to Croke Park, I think it was 1954. I went up for the hurling final against Wexford, the Rackards. And we had Ringy, and Wexford beat us. Now we go back on the train crying in our tomato sandwiches. And 2 weeks later, we're back for the football final against Galway. And Stockwell and Purcell take us apart. 2 matches, 2 All-Irelands in the space of 2 weeks, we lose both of them. So I haven't given up hope yet. The following year, we get to the football final against Loud. Now, we're not going to lose to Loud. Captained by an accordion player. And we lose to Loud. And I said, I'm never going to Croke Park again. And I didn't go to Croke Park again until it was a rugby match.
I knew you were going to say that.
Listen, we'll be here all night.
We will. George, this has been an absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.